Access Control in the Enterprise, Chapter 5. Learning Objectives and Key Concepts. Learning objectives. Design appropriate authentication solutions throughout an IT infrastructure. Access Control Lists, ACLs, Access Control Models, Single Factor and Multifactor Authentication, Wireless IEEE 802.11, LANs, Best Practices for Private and Public Sector Authentication. Access control in the enterprise. Access control and authentication within enterprise is a large-scale problem with multiple solutions. Handling access control and authentication depends on risks associated with the information activities of the network. Organizations that maintain large amounts of credit card information or personal identifiable information on its customers incur a higher impact if that information is removed or access elicited. Corporations must let third parties know when certain information has been compromised within their systems. Access control lists, ACLs, access control entries, ACEs. An ACL is made up of ACEs. An ACA contains at least two items, a security identifying and one or more of authorized levels of SIDs. A SID is created for a user group or a computer account when a new account is first created. Authorization levels established against the user group or systems are allowed to deny or audit. ACL permissions. Delete allows the ability to delete an object. Read allows the ability to read the object. Write allows the ability to write the object. Modify allows the ability to read, write, execute, and delete. May not include files permissions. Execute allows the ability to execute a program. Full control allows all abilities including permissions. No access denies access to the object. Types of access control list. Discretionary access control lists contains ACEs that allow or deny submits permissions to interact with object. System control list, SACLs, contain ACEs that allow systems administration to require auditing of the success and failure of attempts of interaction with objects. The CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Discretionary access control, DAC, mandatory access control, MAC, role-based access control, RBAC, attribute-based control, ABAC, rule-based access control, RuBAC, and risk-adaptive access control, RADAC. Discretionary access control, DAC, means of restricting access to an object based on the identity of the subjects and or group in which they belong. Controls are discretionary, and the subject with certain access permissions may pass that permissions to the other subjects unless restricted by mandatory access control. Most widely used access control method allows owner of resources to manage who cannot access it. Owners maintain the access through ACLs can delegate the ability to modify permissions in others. Mandatory access control, a means of restricting access to the object based on sensitivity of the information contained in the objects and the formal authorization of subjects to access information such as sensitivity. Sensitivity is represented by a label, formal authorization equals clearance, one of the most secure methods. Role-based control. Role assignment. Subjects can execute actions only if subjects have been assigned to a role. All active users must have an active role. Role authorization. Subject's active role must be authorized by the subject. Transactions authorization. Subjects can execute a transaction only if the transaction is authorized for the active role. Bell-LaPadula Model. Confidentiality rules within the U.S. government are established through the Bell-LaPadula Model. Simple secure rule. A subject cannot read an object that maintains a higher security level. It is also known as the no read up rule. A user with a secret security clearance cannot read a document of higher classification, such as top secret. Property rule. A subject cannot write to an object that maintains a lower security level, is also known as the no write down security rule, or with the star property. A rule. A user with top secret clearance cannot write a document that has a lower classification, such as secret. Strong property rule. A subject can read and write in the object only if the object classification and their subject clearance matches exactly. The attribute-based access control. ABAC systems grant access for the subject. ABAC systems are an example of contextual access control that use information about the current state of the user, connection, and device to make authentication device. Bring your own device. Policies are an example of ABC. Attributes used to access decisions is the attribute of the device being used rather than the user's identity. History-based control is another example of contextual access control. HBAC takes the past and present activity of a user into account when making access control decisions. Rule-based access control. Systems operate in a manner similar to a MAC system. Systems administrator define a set of rules for a system, service, or device. Set of rules determine future access. Network firewall is the most common example. Risk adaptive access control. Authentication factors, 1 of 4. Something you know, something you have, something you are. Something you know. Having a specific knowledge that is a unique subject. A password is generally combined with a unique identifier such as a username or user ID. Can have multiple limitations based on length, special characters, complexity, and reuse factor, or may not have no limitations. The more specific or unique a password is, the stronger it is, has a lower chance of being guessed or cracked. Personal identification name or a passphrase. NIST Special Publication 800-63B, Digital Identity Guidelines recommends do not require password changes unless the account is believed to be compromised. Password expiration policies promote bad habits such as writing down passwords. Require the user of multi-authentication to strengthen access control security. Require the use of passwords that are at least 8 characters long but do not implement any other complexity requirement, and these make passwords more difficult to remember. Implement password filtering that prevents users from adopting passwords that appear to be a password dump list from previous breaches or organizations. Consists only of dictionary words or slight variation of a dictionary word. Contains repetitive or sequential characteristics such as 1, 2, 3, 8 or ABCD, 1, 1. Contains contextual clues of the user's identity. Authentication factors. Dictionary attacks, matching common words in a dictionary to passwords until a match occurs. Brute force attacks, using software codes to run through password schemes. Eavesdropping, listening on the network. Social engineering, convincing users a site is secure and known. Authentication factors 3 or 4. Malicious activities carried out by Trojans, viewing the screen on the computer system, keystroke logging, stealing passwords and private identification, changing, deleting, and installing files. Man-in-the-middle attacks, phishing, spear phishing, and SMS phishing. Distribution of passwords and PINs, postal mail, SMS, email, options for password distribution. Something you have. A token, a physical or software device that can be used instead of a password or in conjunction with a password or PIN. Synchronous token. Use time or a counter as a means of authentication. Asynchronous token. Uses a challenge and a response as a means of authentication. Time variable token is a synchronous token in the form of a one-time password. Challenge response device, an asynchronous token. Something you have. Here's an example of a token. A smart card, also known as the integrated circuit, ICC, same size as a credit card and has computer chip embedded in it. Holds data on the owner of the card and uses with smart card devices. Very reliable. Contact smart card must be inserted into the smart card reader and authentication process. Contactless smart card uses an access into facilities. Card is waved in front of the reader to verify access. Something you have. Based on characteristics of a specific person. Biometrics involves scanning and analyzing the characteristics of a user and matching against information collected during enrollment. Physiology-based biometrics uses attributes that are unique to the user, fingerprints, facial features, retinal patterns. Behavior-based biometrics uses characteristics based on a pattern such as a typing rhythm, handwriting, or online access patterns. Use only one of the authentication factors associated with password, least secure. Factors, usage criteria, multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication standards for securing access to sensitive systems. Use at least two different techniques from different factors characterize authentication. Two-factor authentication users provide two authentication mechanisms, strong authentication. Three-factor authentication includes all authentication factors of something you know, something you have, and something you are. Kerberos, a network protocol used to provide authentication and authentication. Kerberos trusted key centers, Kerberos ticket granted, and Kerberos authentication service. And this is kind of how it looks. Use of systematic key and trusted third-party authentication. Authentication performs as a trusted third-party authentication service via a shared secret key. Symmetric key. Secret key is used for encryption and decryption. Without Kerberos, principals do not trust each other. Principals can be applications, user, or network service. Key distribution centers act as a trusted third party, provide secure environment for distribution keys, provides tickets and temporary session keys, acts as both authentication service and a ticket granted service. Authentication tickets are generated by the KDC. Tickets are provided to the principals when authentication is needed. Potential weaknesses, brute force attacks, key storage. Kerberos tickets are cached on user's computer. Clocks must be synchronized to complete authentication. Central service continuous available requirements for host synchronization, potential single point of failure. Kerberos in a business environment. Kerberos used daily in many organizations for employee authentication, access to resources, access to corporate networks through authentication of ID credentials, access to authentication to network services and devices such as functions. Network access control. The use of policies within the network infrastructure to limit access to resources until the system proves that it has compiled with the policy. NAC components include computer systems, routers, switches, servers, network firewalls. An example, a router might not allow you network access if you don't have the correct IP associated with your computer. Layer 2 techniques. Layer 2 of an open system interconnection, OSI reference model, refers to the data link, allows communication with a wide area, or WAN, and local area. Sublayers of the data link, logic link control, provides flow, control, error notification, and acknowledgement. Media access control, or MAC, provides the determination as who can talk when on the network. MAC address, database, and LAN switches. MAC address, a unique identifying network device assigned by the vendor of the device associated with the network interface card. Address is 48 bits in length and is identified as 12 hexadecimal digits. Defining broadcast domains. Broadcast domains fall within a data link layer. Allows network devices to broadcast MAC address to everyone on the LAN. Limiting the number of devices on domain limits the number of network devices that can talk without a switch. IEEE 802.1Q, Virtual Local Area Networks, defined in the IEEE 802.1Q standard. Segments of the network traffic and limited communications between networks, used to separate networks with different resources. Collection of devices in a single thing may be used as a temporary basis for projects. 3-layer technique. Access control list, route maps, disabling IP routing from complete IP traffic isolation. Wireless IEEE 802.11 LANs, access control to IEEE 802.11 WANs, identification, confidentiality, and authorization. Single sign-on, a method of access control that allows a user to log onto the system and gain access to the other resources within the network via an initial logon. It eliminates the need to remember multiple passwords, ensures the same password policies apply to all resources, reduces the need for the administrator to manage various accounts and individuals. Defining the scope of SOS. The scope of an SO is to provide unified sign-on interface for end users that allow them to authenticate once the access multiplayer application interface. Interface is independent of authentication mechanisms. An SSO interface provides the capability to use credentials for the other system. Configuring users and role-based access profiles. Configuring access control profiles. Adding access control adds an extra layer of security for the SSO. Using credentials to limit access to resources and document is essential for organizing and attempting to limit the level of risk. Configuring users and role-based access control profiles in an SSO system can be simplified. Access management software allows you to incorporate SSO capabilities and role-based control in a few steps. Common configurations, Kerberos, from a single sign-on, use third-party infrastructure. Cookies, place a machine at a time of login. System checks for cookies on future logins. If valid, no additional login required. Smart cards or biometrics. Authentication through a smart card or biometric allows access to the other tools available on the system. Enterprise single sign-on allows credentials to be passed outside of the corporate domain or network. Ensures login credentials work with any resource even if the credentials do not match. Best practices for handling access control is an enterprise organization. Discover the identity of all on the network. Develop policies based on risk associated with data. Place appropriate access control on the database. Data based on risk level. Continuous monitoring and test and access control. Case studies and examples. Private sector, KMU, no access control, transitions to a role-based access control system after the acquisition and two-factor authentication. Public sector, Town of Springfield, security lapses occur in which confidentiality documents are made public. Municipalities implemented mandatory MAC systems. Critical infrastructure, government contractor, aircraft schematics for the presidential aircraft are stolen. Contractors identifies gap in implementation, additional security message. Summary, access control, ACLs, access modes, single factor and multi-factor authentication, wireless IEEE 802.11 LANs, best practices for private and public sectors.